They hid their daughter's body in their family restaurant. On January 2017, 5-year-old Ashley Zhao was beaten to death by her mother, 30-year-old Ming Ming. Ming Ming then reported Ashley missing and said that she went to take a nap in the family restaurant's back room, and when she came to check up on her that night, she was gone. But after police investigated, they found that no one saw Ashley leave the restaurant. The next day, police found Ashley's body lifeless in the family restaurant's back room. After interviewing Ashley's parents, Ming Ming admitted to hitting her daughter repeatedly in the head, and then she passed away. Apparently, she did this because Ashley was having accidents. After the beating, Ashley's father noticed that she was gasping for air and green fluid was coming out of her mouth, and then she stopped breathing. Ming Ming then ordered her husband to hide their daughter's body in the backroom restaurant. The couple basically carried on with the restaurant's hours of operation while their daughter laid lifeless in the back room. Ashley's father pleaded guilty and received 12 years in prison, and Ming Ming was sentenced to 22 years in prison.
Here's 5 things our parents lied to us about. Cracking your knuckles will give you arthritis. This isn't true. The noise is caused by negative pressure temporarily pulling nitrogen gas into the joint. If you swallow gum, it will stay in your stomach for 7 years. This is not true. It will be excreted within a few days. Sitting too close to the TV will hurt your eyes. This is actually a very popular misconception. A long-term extensive study has shown that myopia in children has nothing to do with this. If you keep going cross-eyed, you'll get stuck like that forever. This is simply false. Your hair will grow faster the more often you cut it. This isn't true. There are a number of factors affecting it, such as age, hormones, and even the time of year.
Here are 3 terrifying animals that you're glad are extinct. Number 1, the megalodon shark. This animal grew up to 60 feet long, and one tooth could be the size of a human. Megalodons were meat-eating creatures that could literally kill anything. Number 2, the Caprasuchus. This animal is a crocodile T-Rex hybrid. It has long legs and is extremely fast. I can guarantee that you won't be able to outrun this guy. Number 3, the Titanoboa. This snake weighed about 2,000 pounds and grew up to 40 feet long. This snake would kill their prey with constriction, which means they would suffocate them to death.
Here's what would happen to you if you just stopped eating. In the first 6 hours, everything would be normal as your body breaks down food to provide energy for your brain. But after 6 hours, all that energy is used up. So you'd begin to starve, entering a state called ketosis, which is when your body uses excess fat to produce energy. After 72 hours, your body will begin breaking down muscle for energy, essentially eating itself. And after 1 to 2 weeks, you're more likely to die from the common cold than starvation.
Morbid Facts, Part 467. In 2013, double amputee and 4-time Paralympic gold medalist Oscar Pistorius shot his girlfriend 3 times through a locked bathroom door, claiming he mistook her for an intruder. During his murder trial, Pistorius removed his prosthetics and hobbled on his stumps, while apparently attempting to garner sympathy and a more lenient sentence. But the judge wasn't buying it and sentenced the athlete to 15 years in prison for murder. This is the skeleton of a female vampire pinned to the ground with a sickle across her throat to prevent her from returning from the dead. It was found during an archaeological dig at a 17th century cemetery in Poland. In the late 1800s, there is an urban legend about a demonic figure roaming around the Arizona deserts that killed multiple people. It turned out to be a feral camel with the decaying corpse of a male soldier strapped to its back. Likely the tragic result of Jefferson Davis's attempt to create a camel division in the U.S. Army.
Here's why bees die after stinging you. When a bee stings you, it buries its barbed stinger deep into your skin. Then it releases a dose of venom filled with protein-rich substances that makes the sting painful. The venom also affects your skin cells and could also affect your immune system. But all of this comes at a huge cost to the bee. After inserting their barbed stinger into a person, they are unable to pull it out. The only way they can free themselves from the stinger is to rip their bodies apart, leaving the stinger behind. Unfortunately, the stinger also contains parts of the bee's muscles, nerves, and digestive tract. And without these vital body parts, the bees cannot survive and suffer a gory death.
This woman was married to a TikTok serial killer for 7 years, but now she's turning back to TikTok for help. You see, this is her ex, Kareem Salim. But before he became known as the New Cairo Butcher, he was a TikToker with over 600,000 followers teaching people American slang. But then, in May this year, he was arrested for the murder of multiple women in Egypt, and a few months later was found guilty and sentenced to death. This case was huge in Arab media due to how shocking the crimes were. Investigators found that he had soundproofed his apartment so that when he tortured his victims, no one would hear them scream. It was so gruesome that when videos which he would record himself were played in court, his entire defense team of 5 lawyers immediately withdrew from the case and apologized to the judge for ever representing him. And I'm skimming over this, but it's like Ray William Johnson next video kinda bad. Anyway, his ex-wife, who had a child with Kareem but had been separated for the past 3 years, claimed that she had to go into hiding and flee to the UK because he tried to kill her and her sister multiple times. But then just yesterday in a TikTok, she said that Kareem had taken her son and he's now with Kareem's mother either in Egypt or America. So she's desperately trying to raise awareness so she can find him and be reunited. And if you want more details, I've tagged her profile below.
Morbid Facts, Part 466. During an SAS training exercise in 1996, 21-year-old Bear Grylls broke his back after falling 16,000 feet when his parachute failed to open. His surgeon wasn't sure if Grylls would ever walk again, but the survival expert climbed Mount Everest just 18 months later, becoming the youngest Brit to ever do it. Here's a photo of 13-year-old Barbara Kent and her fellow campers playing in a New Mexico river, just hours before the first atomic bomb was tested 40 miles away from them. Over the next few days, the area was covered in fallout flakes that the campers thought was snow, only it was hot instead of cold. The US government had selected the site for its supposed isolation, but in reality, thousands of people were within a 40-mile radius and weren't evacuated nor warned before the test. Despite being diagnosed with 4 different types of cancers throughout her life, Barbara was the only girl in the above photo who lived past the age of 30, somehow making it to 83.
You guys remember when this man attacked the judge after she gave him a sentencing that he wasn't too happy with? So before this happened, he was sentenced to 19 months to 4 years in prison. But after attacking the judge, he was just sentenced to 26 to 65 years in prison. But this video made me feel so uneasy because look at him. He looks like he wants to jump over there and attack the prosecutor. Then he explains himself and says that on that day when he attacked the judge, he just saw red.
Like, this is not fair. All I see was red, and all I heard her say, oh, this, like she said, I finally watched the whole video. I was standing here in the courtroom with all of you guys.
These are the best elf on the shelf pranks. These elves are ironing out the wrinkles in the chips. This elf is disguising the Brussels sprouts as chocolates. And this elf is doing target practice with a bottle of ketchup. At least his aim is kind of good. And this elf opened up his own car wash. And this elf managed to sneak his way up to the cookie jar. And this elf has a poop museum. But that's exactly what I expected the unicorn poop to look like. Make sure you don't have any of this freshly squeezed juice because I don't think it's juice. They wrapped up the entire bathroom. How are you supposed to use that? And these elves are fishing in the sink. These elves know how to party. They're bungee jumping.
He was left in a tanning bed for 3 days until his body was discovered. On November 8th of this year, 39-year-old Derek Sink visited a Planet Fitness to sign up for a membership. He was accompanied by his girlfriend Heather and her daughter, but while he was signing up, they left to a nearby store. When they returned, Derek was gone. They noticed that Derek's car was still in the parking lot, but they believed that maybe he had left the gym. However, as the hours started to pass by with no sign of him, they started to get concerned. Derek's family finally reported him missing on November 10th. The next morning, Derek's probation officer had visited the gym, which was his last known location. He made a shocking discovery when they found his body inside of a tanning bed, and it was believed that he was there for 3 days. This discovery was made when a worker noticed a bad odor coming from the tanning area. As the investigation began, Derek was wearing an ankle monitor, and it revealed that he had never left the gym. Family members revealed that Derek struggled with addiction, and once his body was found, they found a needle in the tanning room with him. My biggest question is how the workers did not notice that his body was there for 3 days in that tanning bed. It really does not make sense.
These are the worst Christmas gifts of all time. Up first, we have this savage grandma. She sent her daughter a gift card, but it said, maybe next year you'll make us proud. Ouch. And here's another grandma who put almost no effort into the gift. She sent her granddaughter a used notebook with scribbles inside. Next, this guy asked his dad for a GPS for the new car he bought that year. But instead, his dad gifted him a map. And this girl received a creepy porcelain doll from her grandma. And she's been terrified of it ever since and believes it's haunted. Which I think it is.
Do you guys remember the two girls who recorded their murder before their bodies were found near a wooded area?
Trying to identify the suspect in this photo and this voice.
On February 2017, 13-year-old Abby Williams and 14-year-old Liberty German were walking along Delphi Historic Trails, Indiana, when they snapped these photos right before they went missing that evening. Police suspected that the man in this photo was involved in their disappearance and murder, but they didn't know who this man was. The girls' bodies were found the next day very close to where they took those photos. And police received multiple tips that the man in the recording and photo on Liberty's phone was 50-year-old Richard Allen. Richard was arrested and charged, but he pleaded not guilty and kept his innocence. But recently, on April 3rd of this year, Richard called his wife Kathy and confessed to murdering both Abby and Liberty. Investigators believe that Richard forced the girls down a hill and took their life with a .40 caliber.
Let's talk about what happened to Jacob Landine and how his killer is still out there. Jacob was born on July 1st, 1986 to his mother Brenda and to his father Gene in Texas. He had an older brother named Eric, and Eric was so excited about having a new baby brother. This is something that he really wanted for a long time, and the day that Jacob was born was just like the best day ever for everyone. Now, their father Gene wasn't really in the picture. He was actually having an emotional affair with another woman, and when Brenda found out about that, she decided to leave him. She grabbed the two kids, she packed everything up, and they all moved to Socorro, New Mexico. Now, the reason they moved there is because that's where Brenda's family was, so she figured that they would be able to help watch the children while she went to work and, help provide for the family. Now, during this time, Brenda started to grow closer to an old family friend. Now, Eric asked that we do not use this man's name, so for the sake of the video, I'm just going to refer to him as Nick. Nick and Brenda pretty much grew up together. His sister actually married Brenda's brother, and his aunt was Eric's godmother. So in a way, they all had some type of connection, and when Nick entered their life, Eric was very happy about this. Nick was very kind to him. He would watch movies with Eric, he would take care of baby Jacob, and Eric just felt like this was the father figure that he had been looking for. He was just very charismatic, and in December of 1986, Brenda and Nick decided to move in together with the two children. Unfortunately, soon after Nick entered their lives, baby Jacob started to receive unexplained injuries. The first incident that happened is when Brenda noticed that Jacob had a skinned ear. So she took him to the doctor, and as they were trying to figure out what happened, Nick came over to Brenda and said that Eric was responsible for this injury. He said that Eric had picked up Jacob from his crib and then dropped him to the floor. That the reason he had done this is because Eric was jealous of his new baby brother. So Brenda goes over to Eric, she asked him about this, and she was able to get Eric to admit that yes, he did this. Now keep in mind that at this time, Jacob is only 6 to 7 months old and Eric is 6 years old. So for a 6-year-old to reach over to a crib, pick up a baby, and then drop him to the ground, it just kind of seemed odd. But this is what Nick was telling Brenda. He was telling her that he had seen Eric be jealous before and that this wasn't the first time that Eric had injured baby Jacob. The second injury occurred 2 to 3 weeks later. This is when the kid's grandmother, Merlinda, was taking care of baby Jacob and noticed a lump on his head. Took him to the doctor and they told her that this injury came from a blow to the head and that Jacob had a hematoma, and that his injury needed to be drained and lanced immediately. This is a huge injury. This isn't something that's caused by just like playing around or getting a thump on the head. Once again, Nick blamed Eric for this injury, and he told Brenda that he saw Eric kick baby Jacob in the head. Eric says that he has no memory of actually kicking baby Jacob, but he just feels like that would not be possible. He was only 6 years old, so how could a kick from a 6-year-old cause such a big injury? Again, no one saw Eric kick baby Jacob. The only person that saw this was Nick. And at this point, he had been blaming Eric for all of these unexplained injuries that baby Jacob had. After all of this happened, Brenda decided to send Eric to go live in California with his father. However, even with Eric out of the picture, the injuries to baby Jacob did not stop. Okay, more in part 2.
She took her neighbor's life because he didn't like his Christmas gifts. Melissa Young was born in Perth, Australia in the late 1970s, and when she was a teenager, she would get bullied often for her cross-dressing, and this would lead her to drinking heavily. At the age of 26, Melissa transitioned in 2002, embracing her new identity. About a year later, she started working at a brothel in Edinburgh, Scotland. While working, she had a pattern of stealing not just from her clients, but her coworkers as well. Eventually, Melissa got fired and she was sentenced to 18 months in prison for shoplifting. During this time, she was dealing a lot with her addiction and she was just not doing well. On December 25th of 2013, Melissa made a call to emergency services claiming that her neighbor, Alan Williamson, was refusing to leave her home. Later that evening, she made a second call to emergency services and she admitted to stabbing Alan in her home. When police arrived to Melissa's home, they found her hands covered in blood and right behind the front door was Alan's lifeless body. In the kitchen, police had discovered the weapon that Melissa had used and Alan had suffered from 29 injuries. The following day, Melissa was examined by a doctor and she told that doctor that she was possessed, that she was hearing voices, she saw a bright light, she flipped and attacked Alan. She also stated that she was disgusted with her other neighbors and wanted to unalive all of them, and then she covered her mouth and said, "Oops, did I say too much?" Melissa then started to shift the blame onto Alan, stating that she had gave him a Christmas present of some shoes and a calendar, and by his reaction she could tell that he did not like them, and she claimed that if he would have just accepted the gifts, she would have never done this to him. In August of 2014, Melissa was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. She must serve at least 20 years in prison before she can apply for parole.
Things you've never seen before. NASCAR cars can actually go this fast. Here's a video x-ray of a dog devouring its food. And this is what the inside of a violin looks like. It looks like a one-bedroom apartment in New York. Believe it or not, but right now you're looking at 1 million colors. In this picture, the color of each pixel is slightly different. This picture hasn't been photoshopped in any way. It's actually just the darkest material in the world. Before I tell you what it's called, I just found a way to make a bunch of new friends by live streaming with 0 requirements. So if you want to try live streaming, just press right here. Known as Vanna Black, this substance absorbs nearly all the light that strikes it. And when it's painted on a 3D object, it makes it look completely fake because of how dark it is.
Let's talk about the disappearance of 6-year-old Katie Jacobs and how this doll and a necklace helped solve her case. Katie had gone to the Potomac Mills Mall in Virginia with her family. At one point, she had gone off with her Aunt Susan and her cousin Jeremy to go play in the arcade. However, her Aunt Susan said that she needed to go engrave a lighter for her husband because his birthday was just around the corner, so she left Katie and Jeremy alone. Jeremy says that he was playing a video game while Katie was standing next to him and that she actually wanted to leave to go get some ice cream. So he finished up his game, and when he looked back to where Katie was standing, she was gone. He went to go tell his parents, and his mom called the police and reported her niece as missing. The police and the FBI arrived at the scene and immediately put the mall on lockdown. They began handing out flyers with Katie's face on them and were asking the crowd if anyone had seen her. However, no one in the mall had seen Katie. Now, a week earlier, a young girl named Jessica Davis had been abducted from a mall and found dead 3 days later. The FBI was worried that this might be the same offender. So they began to look through the surveillance footage at the mall to see if they could retrace Katie's last steps. And they spot her leaving the arcade, and you can see her looking over at someone that's standing next to her, possibly walking alongside her, but they can't make out who this person is. And 7 seconds later, Katie disappears. There's no other footage of Katie leaving the mall, so they believe that she and her abductor are still inside. A canine dog tracks Katie's scent and leads police to a trash can. Inside the trash can, they found Katie's necklace. The clasp was broken, and it appeared as if someone had ripped this necklace from Katie's neck. With this information, the FBI no longer believes that Katie's abduction is related to Jessica Davis. This seems personal, and whoever ripped the necklace from Katie's neck did it with rage. Since they now believe that this is a family abduction, FBI agent Reed and Morgan head over to Katie's house to see if they can find any clues. There, they find this doll in Katie's room. They believe that this doll represents how Katie feels. She feels dirty and ugly. And Agent Reed and Morgan believe they know why. So back at the mall, FBI agents ask Katie's mom how she got this necklace. And she says that Katie just found it at school one day. Now, this necklace was very expensive, so there's no way that Katie just randomly found this at school. So why does she lie to her mom about it? This is when the FBI begins to get suspicious of Katie's family, so they interrogate Katie's Aunt Susan and her Uncle Richard separately. During his interrogation, Uncle Richard actually reveals that he hasn't smoked in over a month. Why did his wife Susan say that she left Katie and Jeremy alone to go engrave a lighter for him, if he hadn't even smoked in over a month? When the FBI confronts Susan with this, she breaks down. She reveals that her husband Richard has been abusing Katie and that he was the one that gave her the necklace to keep quiet. Susan knew about the abuse, and instead of helping her niece, she decided to abduct Katie and get rid of her. She figured that if Katie was gone, then her husband would go back to loving her. She ends up telling the police where she hid Katie, and thankfully she was found alive and reunited with her family. Both Richard and Susan were arrested. Thankfully, this is a fictional story from the show Criminal Minds. If you want to watch the FBI's Behavior Analysis Unit catch more bad guys and solve more cases, you can watch Criminal Minds on Hulu.